During the course of this week, we will be covering CSS, or cascading style sheets, which are often used within HTML files. If you had any issues completing Homework 3 or Project 1, please refer to the My Works section of the web space I have created for this course for you. Again, please note that only the past due assignments will be posted on the web space for your review. So why CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It allows us to utilize different parameters that help us change the layout of multiple web pages at once. Generally, we may refer to our CSS file, our .css extension, right from a subfolder, which we will explain later on. So what do style sheets do? They create the look of our web page. What the text color is, what the header color is, whether the headers are bold or not, and they could be defined in three ways. The external method is the one previously mentioned, where you save it in a .css file and store it somewhere on your web server. Internal is defined right within the HTML file in the header section. Inline is also done right within the HTML file, but it is done within existing tags, usually within the body section of your HTML code. So how do we use these? As mentioned, inline, we simply add style attributes to our elements. Internally, we have to add our style tag element within the header section. Externally, we use our link tag in order to reference to where our .css file is stored externally. So here is an example of inline CSS. You'll notice our header, our style, and now we set our color to blue. If you were to put this in an HTML file, a blue heading text would be blue. You'll notice the same with our paragraph tag. We add the style element color red. Our text for the paragraphs would be red. How about an internal example? You'll notice here our style tag is set up within our body section. Here we create the background color for the body as powder blue, and we do the same as we previously did with our inline example of making our header blue and our paragraph text red. Again, note how you require to have the style tag used when doing the internal example. Then the external example. Here is how it is set up. We have some .css cascading style sheet file saved somewhere on our web server called styles.css. If your HTML file is in the exact same place, you don't need to specify the rest of the URL. Generally speaking, to make everything fluid, you want to have the complete URL listed. You'll also notice how our link tag is listed here with the rel parameter. Here is what would be within the styles.css code. And this is in essence what you are completing for your assignment this week. We have our body, what our background color will be, our header, what our header color will be, our text and what our colors will be for the text. You'll notice everything needs to be closed with a semicolon. You simply put this in a notepad file and save it as a CSS extension file. So what can you control with CSS? We've already discussed color. You can also change font, size of text, spacing, where elements are positioned, such as centering, what background images or colors to use. We touched on background colors in the previous example, and different displays for different devices and screen sizes. Often, different web browsers may display things differently, so CSS is important with that respect. So why do you want to use style sheets? You can change them on the fly based on the different web browsers. You can also give the change possibility right to yourself. Or, in some instances, you may want to use JavaScript in order to allow other people to have functionality and change the page. You'll notice this most often on web pages related to text size. They may be given the option to make the text on your website bigger or smaller based on their viewing needs. So here are two more style sheet examples. You'll notice we've created a solid black border and we've justified our text to the left. In this example, we've now made our solid border red with our header, and we've the text aligned and justified to the right. So how style sheets are put together? You need a selector, some properties, and some values. So the syntax, our selector always goes before our brackets. Our property is always followed by a colon, then our values, and then we close them with a semicolon, and we close out our selector with a bracket. As previously mentioned, when we want to externally refer to a style sheet within an HTML document, we use our link tag. And here's an example. As previously shown, we're assuming that the styles.css file is in the exact same folder as our HTML file. Style sheet styles. We may need an ID, which defines the larger structures in our HTML. We may need a class, similar to what you may have seen in programming languages that you have used. For example, our header here, we may have a class name. Elements, as touched on, are features of the tags. We mentioned the previous example of link. Rel is an element of the link tag. Here are some visuals of how a style sheet looks. You'll notice here, for H1, we've created a solid black border, which you see here. We create a second header with the color green. We then create a border for that. Next, we have another header 2 created this time with red text and a border, and so on and so forth. Here we have another example. We've defined red font, blue font, green and orange font, blue and green font, green and orange font. You'll notice how they come out here. First is red, second is blue, third is green and orange, fourth is blue, fifth is green and orange, just as we have detailed in our code on the left. So what does the style tag actually do? First, we need it between our code to open and close to tell our web browser that this is CSS code. The style tag is also helpful with JavaScript code, which we'll see later in this course. If you do not have the style code, the style tags within your code, it will not be recognized. So in building assignment 4, let's first start and create our CSS code within an HTML file. We need our HTML header and body tags, as well as to close them out. Next, we want to put some sample text there. We'll start with our header test and our text random text here. We put them within our HTML file. We then need to put our style tag into our HTML code. Next, we need to actually put the information we need within our style tags. We need our body, our background color of what the body will be, our header, what our header color will be, our paragraph text, and the color that will be. This is the code that you will have to edit for your assignment. You'll put this in a simple notepad and save it as a .css file. However, you need to change the background color to the color asked for, and the header and paragraph text color has been asked for a different color you put for each section. As mentioned, you want to save it as a .css file, not as a .html file. Ideally, you should make a full HTML file with the CSS code inside it first, and then extract it to make your .css file. So there are some properties associated with CSS. The color property can define text color. The font family property can define what text you want to use. Comic Sans, Times New Roman as examples. The font size property allows you to define the text size, 16, 24, etc. The border property allows you to create a border around the HTML element, as shown in the two examples provided. The padding property defines the padding space between the text and the border, how much quote-unquote white space there is. And the margin defines how much the margin is outside of the border. Again, you need to use the style attribute for inline styling within the tag and element. The style tag is used for internal CSS. The link tag refers to external CSS files. As previously mentioned, there are multiple things we can do property-wise with CSS. So here's an example with CSS linking that refers to the entire URL of a .css file. As mentioned, you would only need styles.css in this example if your HTML page was in the same folder as your style sheet. Most people tend to do it this way so that you can have all of your web pages simply refer to your style sheet instead of having to put all of the web pages, your HTML pages, in the same folder. You'll notice the example specified here. Styles.css is in the same folder as your HTML files. The folder here in this instance is HTML. In this instance, they're all on the same folder, However, they're not in a created folder such as HTML in the previous example. They are all in the public HTML folder. And that is the conclusion of our CSS topics for this week.